So now it's time to put this gearbox back together. We've inspected the shaft, we know it's clean, and I've just oiled it. I've used some brake cleaner to clean it initially, just give it a nice clean. Dry it off with the airline. Where's the oil can? You see it. Give it some oil, because you can't have enough oil. Look at that, that's nice. And now we can assemble the parts. So first of all, we're going to put the third gear on, which is here. Again, we've oiled it all up prior to fitting. Now there is a little spacer in there, so there's a bearing and a spacer. How do they go together? Well, it's quite simple really. You put the bearing on first, and you'll find there's a shoulder for the spacer to go on. You can't put it the other way around. You see? That's how that goes onto there. It should be a little bit, that should tap down a little bit. There, that should be, there. That's nice and square. Oh, I pulled it off again. So that, there we go, so that's nice and down. So now we can put the gear on again, plenty of lubrication in the gear, pop it on, that's done. Next thing, the synchros. Now I've put some new synchros in these hubs here, and what we're going to do is just with our fingers we're going to test these hubs to see if there's no resistance when you flick this backwards and forwards, because you don't want to lose the little balls inside. So we want to make sure that that synchro hub here, this cone is going to go inside. If it's tight, wait a minute, I'll see if I can push this one down. If it's tight, it's going to be a trouble. So what we're going to do, we're going to fit this one, and we're going to fit it with the rounded edge of the reverse gear pointing towards the back. So I've got my synchro ring on in place, and there we go. Now it just jumped out of place there, so I'll put it back in and turn it there so it locks in. Next thing, same thing again. We've got we've cleaned all these pliers just to save a little bit of time. We've got the ring, the bearing. There's a sleeve with the bearing, and there's also a ring that fits on, and then that fits over the top like this. See, nice and smooth. Now there was a little burr on here before, so I've taken that off, so that fits really nice. And now we can test if that synchro is going to work. See, it's easy to put it on, and you can hear it, nice positive click. So I'm happy with that, that's nice. So now I've cleaned the bearing up, I've oiled it, given it a good oil. I'll give it a bit more just in case you don't believe me. And that's nice. We put the bearing on with the circlip pointing towards the back. Oh, wait a minute, first of all, nearly forgot, the shim. We've got to put a shim on there. All will become clear. We put the bearing on. There we go. Now the outer edge of the bearing should be flush with the bottom edge of the snap ring groove. If it isn't, you adjust that shim accordingly. That little shim that goes in here, you either make it thick or you make it thin so the snap ring goes in. And I've got the snap ring, I've got a new snap ring already on the pliers. Open it up, drop it in, and there, look at that, that's gone perfectly. So I'm quite happy with that. Bearing sounds nice, gears are good, nice snap, that's good. Happy. So the next thing, we're going to spin it upside down and put the third gear on. So the same rules apply, plenty of oil, can only put the bearing on one way around. You see there's a collar that goes on the top. It's a bit nippy, but wait a minute, we'll get it on. But what I'm trying to say is the bearing has to go at the bottom, it can't go anywhere. So then you put your little retaining collar on, a little bit tight, little tappet. There, just snapped into place. Then we can put the gear on, but this time the cone faces the opposite way. And we're looking around these gears, make sure they're all nice and they're not too many sharp edges. And then we can get the gear, get some oil out, get some oil, plenty of oil on there. There. The next thing we need to do is put on, where's it gone? Just wait a minute, I'm looking for the bit. I've moved it. I forgot to add something before we put this third and fourth synchro back on. What's actually in it? Well, you've got some little pads in here, like that. They fit in the corners. Now you've got to remember that they're slightly rounded. Wait a minute, where have you gone? There you are. They're slightly rounded here. And that round part goes on the outside. Now these are tricky to put back together again. I hate doing these. I think I'd rather do washing up all day than put these together, but never mind, here goes. The problem is, if these accidentally come apart, like this one did, you've got to put them together. And first of all, you've got to find all the bits and pieces. Oh, wait a minute, there you can't see, can you? Wait a minute, there we go. So first of all, you've got to find all the bits and pieces. So there's 3 balls and 3 springs. These ones are pretty good actually, but it's sometimes advisable to take these apart and change the springs and check the balls and stuff like that. So we know that this piece is the top piece, and so is this. Remember, this has got a chamfer on the end, which sort of signals it's this chamfer here. I'm going to zoom out a bit because I think you can see well enough. Whoop, wrong way. So this has got a chamfer on. It's like an arrow pointing towards the top of the gearbox, towards the bell housing. Now sometimes these did I get that one right first time? Yeah, sometimes these don't always line up. The outsides don't always line up with the inside straight away. I sort of struck lucky there, but now I'm going to try and put these springs and balls in here, and it's one of those things I hate doing. There must be a way to do it, but I haven't found out how to do it yet. These are an absolute nightmare. Let me see, because there's 3 of them. So I'm going to slip the ring over the top. Try and push these in together. I hope you can see. See, this is what happens. Right, here we go. So I'm going to try and put the balls in, push them down, hold them in. You can actually push the balls in and push them forwards a little bit. I wouldn't suggest doing this. I wouldn't suggest doing this outside in grass, because once these little chaps go flying around, oh, they're gone. Oh, damn. I'm nearly there. I've just got one to get in. There. It's in. Oop, down. It's in. Right. There. It's back together again. Wow. So what you've got, I don't know if you can see just under there, that was kind of tricky to work with this camera. You've got a spring, a ball, a little slipper, and you've got to put all three in at the same time. There is a technique, but I haven't obviously got it because I never usually take them apart. I just sort of work them around a little bit to make sure that they're going to be alright. So what we need to do, really, is to make sure that when you've got your new selector rings in, it's really important, because there are some dodgy ones kicking about, that when these go in, the teeth of the synchro ring is going to go inside your inside your synchro hub, and some of them don't. I've had a few bad ones, and I don't know. Wait a minute. I think oh, there's the other one. There's the original one still on there. How you can tell a used synchro ring from an old one very quickly is to run your finger or your thumb across the back, and you'll find these are like spiky. The old ones are a little bit spiky, a little bit of a burr on them. So that's how you can tell that. So what we're going to do is we're going to gently put this hub back together, and I'm just going to make sure that these rings are going to go. See, there's on the 300 TDI they had a lot better idea. They put a spring clip on the inside, and that was far superior. These, you see there? You see how it's moving? That's can you see how it's moving? That's what it wants to do. So that's snapped in. The next thing, we're going to go across, and we're going to put the last section on our shaft. So what we've got to do now, we've oiled all our parts up, and we've just got to assemble them. And again, this will only assemble one way. This ring will only go on the top against the shoulder. It will not do anything else. So I've just got that one. It's a little bit of a tight fit, so once it goes on, just tap it down and get it square, and then it'll come off again. So lots of oil, bearing, spacer ring. Again, it just won't go square. It's just a, there we go. Gear, all nicely lubed up. Synchro ring. I just had to double check there, see if I had this the right way around. Synchro ring on. Just make sure that's on the right way. Oh, sugar. Yeah, that's on the right way around. You see, there's a broad shoulder on the back of this ring that goes on here. If not, that's going to be too narrow. There we go, that's that on. Spacer. Obviously we don't have to re-shim this one up. We can get these shims here in different thicknesses to make up the difference in the shaft, and we're going to use our old faithful clippers, and that's on. So that's going to be good. Now, although this is on, these are really difficult to check. Now you see, don't go any further, don't push it up, because this is what will happen to you. The damn things fly off and that's it, you've lost. So, that's together. I'm going to clear up the toys on the bench, and we're going to try and assemble this on the side of the casing, and I'm going to show you how this gearbox works. So you've got to be kind of careful at this stage. Always remember to put this bearing in here. I've seen people put these together and forget to put the bearings in. That causes a lot of trouble. So you're going to assemble everything in one big shaft, and then move all your toys out of the way. Get that out of the way. This is the front of the gearbox. This section here is the front. This is the back. That wasn't too difficult to work out. So what we've got to do is put this into that housing, into that half housing, and we're going to try and keep it as clean as possible and not get any contaminant on the surface where the silicone goes, the sealer. It's going to be kind of tricky, but you know, you need a lot of oil, but you don't need it in the right places. So what you've got to do now is you've got to keep these two pieces together, lift them out, and swiftly, not like Taylor Swift, because she couldn't do this, she's useless. Drop it in the box. Look at that, that's beautiful. Look at that. Just like a real one, look. See if I can zoom in a bit. Bloody technology. What will I think of next? So, that's in. That's ready to clamshell together, really. So, well, apart from putting this piece on. So I'm going to clean this piece up, make sure the bearings are all right, and that's our next stage. So I'll clean this piece up, the layer shaft, and now I'm going to drop it into the box with a bit of luck. There, look at that, snug as a bug in a rug. Look at that. Now, come closer, we'll show you how this works. So a lot of people get confused about how a transmission works, and it is really simple and they all work about the same. I'm going to move the camera a bit, just a second. So how it all works. You've got the parts of the gearbox, we've mentioned some names, but let's run through them again for people who have fallen asleep and just woke up. Probably most of you. This is the primary pinion or the first motion shaft. This brings power from the engine, this one here. Let's have a look around. This is where your clutch plate fits on. There, that's your clutch plate, and when your clutch is engaged and disengages, it engages and disengages your drive to your gearbox. So when you lift your pedal off the clutch clamps up tight, and then power from your engine is delivered down this shaft here. Now, if you'd noticed, if you were still awake, that this shaft is independent to this shaft. Okay, this is what's called your main shaft, this one here. These two are independent. So how does it all work? Well, you need this thing in here. This is called your lay shaft, and it's solid. So what happens when power comes through this engine, or through this shaft, it's transferred directly to this gear here. Now, by logic, because it's all cast in one piece, then this gear drives this gear drives this one drives this one. This one, the reverse, does not drive that one. More later. Gets more interesting. So, how does it work? Well, I'm going to show you, but I'm going to show you in a sort of a simple way. I'm not going to move this synchro here to show you how to get to top gear, but I'm going to explain it. Why? Because there's no stop on this synchro hub here. So if I push that forward, it's all going to come out and we're going to have bits and pieces everywhere. So I'm going to show you when you put it into first gear. So at the moment, your your input shaft is turning, but your output shaft here, your main shaft, is fixed to your wheels. And watch what happens when I turn this, because this is in neutral. And you see what's happening? Because this shaft is fixed, it's turning all these gears, right? You see? Kind of interesting, isn't it? It puts, I'm going to show you, like I say, what happens when we select first gear, and you'll understand that people say, oh, I can't get the gears. They think that these gears are all moving together. What it is these gears on this shaft, on here, are actually, you see, I can stop that gear, you know. These synchro hubs are fixed to this shaft here. So these with the synchros are splined to this shaft. All the rest of the gears, you can see, I'll hold this tight, turn this, and these are running free. And even if I turn this backwards, watch, you see, I can turn that one backwards, turning the main shaft backwards, and the main shaft, the primary pinion forwards. And you can see how the two are disconnected. Now it might become clear how it works. Because when I put this into first gear, if I can, I'm not saying I can, but there. So that's snapped into first gear. Watch what happens now. That shaft now, the input shaft or the primary pinion is connected via this shaft to this gear here. Now, a lot of people get mixed up. They think first gear is at the front of the gearbox. It's actually at the back. God, you're learning some stuff today. And it's Friday. You'll be able to tell your mates that this down the pub this afternoon. But tonight you'll be down the pub drinking and say, by God, I've learnt some stuff today. So when you want to put it into second, this slides forward. It's very difficult to do. There you go. So watch what happens now. That is locked into that gear. So the power's coming down here, along here, to this gear, because that's locked to the main shaft. This looks like it's turning, but it's actually not driving on the main shaft. This is now driving on the main shaft. And the same goes for third gear. Alright? Third gear. You'll snap this back, and now watch this shaft turn a bit faster. You see? It's progressively getting faster and faster. Now what happens when you select top gear, which is one I don't really want to do right now because I think this will fall apart. Well, maybe. Well, let's have a go. Oh, no, it isn't there. So what happens when you select top gear, which is your fourth gear, is that this shaft here is now locked to this shaft here. It's an absolute 1-to-1 ratio, you can see. Kind of easy, isn't it? So let's go back to first gear and watch the difference in speed. You see how many turns I'm turning the primary shaft, and look how many turns are coming out on the main shaft, on the output shaft. Gearing. Very important. So, how do you get reverse? How do you get reverse? So I'm going to lift this shaft out again, and I'm going to show you. If it will. There you go. Reverse has a thing called an idler. Can you see that? It's on a little key here. It's on a shaft, but it's on a pin. And so I'm showing you this now how it drives. So when you put your lay shaft back in, and that's in reverse, if I turn this clockwise, this turns counterclockwise. Can you see that? See it turning counterclockwise? Isn't that clever? So if I deselect it, watch what happens. It's in neutral now. And that's all there is to it. He says, all there is to it. It's very simple. It's very, very simple. Now, couple of other things about gearboxes, I'll just tell you very quickly. If you're interested, listen, but if you're not, well, go down the pub. But some gearboxes lose power because of the helical gearing. So racing gearboxes like they used to have in the old Minis used to use straight cut gears like this. It was a lot more power transfer without any sort of stresses on your gearbox. But it was noisy, really, really noisy. Now, in the days before, so that's that section done. In the days before synchromesh hubs came into existence, the hub still used the same principle applied, but the hubs, instead of having these nice brass rings to smooth the, to slow down the gears, they used to just like what we called a dog clutch, and all it was on the ends of the gears and the end of the selector, it just jumped straight in. So that's why you had to, in the old-fashioned cars, like the very old Land Rovers used to have dog clutches on first and second, but it had a synchro on third and fourth. And so you had to learn to what's called double declutch when you were driving. So you went along and you revved your car up and put it into neutral, revved it up again, put it into gear. It was to speed up the gears so they would synchronize together, so that would synchronize and going together. If not, it used to really grind gears. So a lot of people who don't know how to drive Land Rovers, which I've seen, used to make an awful lot of mistakes. So the next thing, I'm going to just make sure all these surfaces are good, and then I'm going to box up the top. Now, if we're following this LT85 program, because we've got a bit sidetracked now and how the gearbox works, I've put this side at the bottom. Why? Because it's got the tapped holes for the bolts. If I did it the other way around, I would have had to put the bolts in from upside down, and that's a pain. So I'm going to have a quick read of the book and see which product they're recommending to seal up the gearbox. There are different types, and it's not always silicone, so let me find out which one it is. The best product to use, where are you there? There you go, let's get this right. High-low sil 100. This is really good. It dries without air or dries with air, I can't remember. Got a little nozzle in it somewhere. We open the tube. Now once these are open, you haven't got much of a shelf life. You know, there's not much of a shelf life once you've got a tube open, which is kind of sad really, because you know, it's not the cheapest stuff, but it's the best stuff. I'm just going to open the end. There we go. So, good stuff, not cheap stuff, and it will go off. So I've got a tendency to try and wrap these up in a plastic bag and put them in the fridge. Whether it works or not, I do not know. Oh, and I sort of got this stuff on my website now if you're ever interested, because it's really hard to find here. So we're going to put some smears of this stuff on this gearbox, and we're going to go around all the holes, all the threads. We don't want to get any in the threads, because this will smear out something terrible. And of course, we don't want it to leak. That would spoil our day. So we're going to put this all around here. Just a thin layer, we don't need all that much. We really don't. What are the downsides about this stuff? The tubes seem to be very thin. You know, let's see if can you see what I'm doing? It's funny doing this because it's like talking to yourself. Now I've already gone over this with the brake cleaner. I've given everything a good old cleaning up with the brake cleaner. Should be alright. But like I say, let's put a little bit of sealer on this stuff. Make sure it's not going to leak. And really you don't need much more than that. I'm going to put a little bit more down there, along there. Right, that. Good to go. So we put the top on, nice and tight, and now we can put this gearbox together. Yeah. Alrighty. So, yeah, snug as a bug in a rug. So now we're going to put our bolts in. And I'll pause this because this is a bit boring. I'm going to zoom in on this so you can see this a little bit clearly. Even though I didn't put much sealer on, you can see it's all squidged out. Now, if it's squidged out on this side, it's squidged out on the inside as well. So that's why you don't put a great deal on. So I'm going to let that set now. Box is feeling good. Well, when you can hear that rattling, it's the reverse gear's not got its idler, not got its bar on, so it's dropped forward a bit. It's trying to go into reverse. So I'm going to leave that to dry before I do anything else. And also, another thing, I won't be able to get any gaskets until next week because I have to do a special order from the UK, and I haven't got any gaskets. So I'm going to make the frame. It's going to pick off these bolts here. Again, I'm not going to touch it. I'll do that probably tomorrow, and then we can assemble. Oops. We can assemble all the selector shafts in the top, and that's another selection done. Putting the end caps on and the top, well, that's nothing. But I'd much prefer to get this gearbox boxed up as quickly as possible because A, you're going to lose bits and pieces, and B, you're going to get contaminants in because this is it's a proper workshop, so I mean you're going to get dust and bits and pieces, and that's the last thing you want in your gearbox. Sometimes when I fit gearboxes, I run them around for maybe about 1,000 kilometres and then drain the oil again and change the oil. Just put a cheapish sort of oil in at the beginning, and then you can put your quality oil in later. So there you go. So that's that for now, and we'll get back to it when we get some more bits and pieces.